Hi, everyone. We're going to get started shortly. I want to give an extra minute or two for those still joining. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Chart Like a Champ webinar. My name is Marnie, and I'll be your guide through this webinar today. This webinar is part of our ongoing Tableau webinar series. The goal of this series is to provide you all as Tableau users with meaningful and digestible tips and tricks and best practices that you can really incorporate into your everyday use of Tableau. So inspired by the Sankey diagram webinar we did in August, today we're going to be showing you how to create step-by-step a waterfall chart, control chart, spark lines, and much more. And Mike will also be talking through use cases around these visualizations. So some quick intros, as I said, my name is Marnie Rose. I work on the business development side of the house at Meakin, and I'm joined today by Mike McCowan. He is our training program manager. Couple housekeeping items. We're going to be giving away two DoorDash $50 DoorDash gift cards. We do this on most of our webinars. We just randomly select two attendees from the attendee list, and I will announce those winners after the Q&A today. So stick around for that. And along those lines, as you have questions that arise, go ahead and enter them into the Q&A box or the chat box, and we have time set aside at the end for those. So as I said, today's webinar is part of a series that we've been doing the last couple of months. So previous webinars that we've done include Tableau Like a Pro, Sankey diagram. We did one on best practices for dashboard design, Tableau performance considerations, and mastering Tableau calculations. If you missed any of those webinars and want to watch the recordings, you can find them on our website at meakin.tech/events. And we will be sending out a link to that after today's webinar. And then today's webinar is going to be our final in this series, at least for now. I think we're all feeling a little bit worn out with webinars at the moment, so we've decided to press pause and regroup, but we hope to be back with new topics in December or early next year. So in along those lines, if there's topics that you'd like us to present on going forward, definitely let us know, and we'd be happy to incorporate your feedback into our future programming for this series when it picks back up. So before I hand things off to Mike here to jump into the presentation, just want to give you a quick intro to Meakin Associates, who we are and what we do for those of you who might be newer to this series. So we're a data and analytics consulting firm. We're based in Chicago, but we're pretty spread out now. We have consultants kind of across the country at this point. The purpose of this slide is to show you that as a firm, we're vendor agnostic. We do work with a set of strategic partners. As you can see, a lot of these technologies have different flavors. We work with analytics platforms as well as more data management technologies, and then platforms that focus in data science, data integration. So we're really end-to-end systems integrators, and as a technology partner, it's really our role to help implement services and solutions around these technologies. And then if we go to the next slide, so since this is a Tableau webinar, I just wanted to put this slide up here with a couple of the different ways that we help companies get the most out of Tableau. So the first of which is analytics and design and development. And I think this kind of webinar, this webinar series that we've been running with Mike really gives you a good sense of our expertise in this area and some of the ways we can help you, design better dashboards or create new dashboards that follow best practice. We can also help with data prep, getting your data ready to be analyzed in Tableau, server upgrades, managed support, solution tuning, embedding analytics, helping you figure out the best way to share analytics, whatever your audience may be, it's internal or external, integrating your Tableau with CRMs and ERPs, adding an extra layer of security around Tableau if that's something you need, and of course, acquiring licensing or converting to a different licensing model. And last but not least, training. So we can do kind of a more custom training where you send us a data set and Mike works with you to put together a training session using your data and really tailored to your team's needs. Or we can do something a little bit more standard where we use the standard Tableau training curriculum and data set. We can get really creative with the training sessions that we do. So if you're interested at all in kind of talking about how we can help you and your team ramp up on Tableau, definitely reach out to Mike and I, and we can put together a time to chat about training. And then one last thing before I hand this over to Mike, just really quickly wanted to plug our Tableau Tip YouTube video page. So every Tuesday we post a new kind of short form video. Mike creates all the content for this. Topics are everything from custom colors, sets versus groups, Vision tooltip, etc. Definitely check it out. We can send out a link to this YouTube page after the webinar today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, Mike.
All right, thank you, Marnie, for the brilliant introduction. Looks like we got a pretty full house here today, 21 people, which is always encouraging to see. I am a fan of the more in-person lunch and learns where we can all gather around our bagel and coffee, but this is a nice substitute, and congratulations in advance to whoever wins the DoorDash gift card. Make sure you go ahead and accept that. We've had some people that thought it was spam or something like that, but I'm going to ask Marnie for one quick confirmation that we can all see my screen here, and then we'll be ready to away.
Yep, you're good to go, Mike.
All right, beautiful. All right, so the purpose of this was kind of to get out of anything that's super structured or anything like that. One thing that we'll learn as we start using Tableau is that the more techniques that we kind of have and know, we can apply those to a lot of different charts. So your data sets or your data might not lend itself very well to some of these charts, but hopefully we're going to send you home with at least a couple of techniques that you can pull into other charts here. So another thing about our presentation today is it's not meant to be a follow along. I know that that's a way that a lot of people like to learn, but we're going to be moving quickly. As you can see by the tabs in the bottom of this screen here, we have like 15 different charts that we're going to do. So it's meant to sort of be a way for you to go chart shopping, right? So I don't want you to redo all of them, but you can always recheck the video if you found one that you particularly liked. But even if that was the case, I would recommend you get a different type of a catalog here. For example, here, give me half a second. I'm going to drag something on the screen right here. This is one of my favorite chart catalogs, constantly bookmarked, constantly going to this. I'm walking clients through this, trying to make decisions off of this. This is a Tableau Public visualization. If you guys are not familiar with Tableau Public, I would highly recommend you go and tinker around in their gallery section right here where you can see all their viz of the days. But this right here is a great chart catalog here. So you see 9 different types of analysis here, and each one of these will be its own dashboard. So as I click on, ranking right here, it's going to have all the different chart types that are generally associated with ranking. So it's a great way for you to kind of check mark some, say, oh, I like that. This might lend itself very well to that data set. And then obviously Tableau has fantastic support for their products. So even if you don't want to go back and watch this webinar again and pause it every single time that I'm doing something, you can find tutorials in all sorts of different places, including our YouTube channel, right? So most of these charts that we're about to go over have an individual video on our channel if you wanted to use ours or another blog that you like their writing style. So with all the caveats out of the way, let's go ahead and get to work here. So our first one's going to be a waterfall chart, so we can see the completed chart right here. It's great for part to whole analysis, especially when some of your values can be negative. So we're going to go ahead and start a new sheet and build this here from scratch. So we'll take our subcategory out right here. We want to take our profit up, and we want to do a running total of our profit here. Now we have our profit running total along the screen. We want to change that to a Gantt bar. And anyone familiar with project management, we want to size these Gantt bars by a value that goes into it. So if the bar goes up, obviously we have a positive profit. And over here on the right, if it goes down, we have a negative one. So in order to size this bar, you might think, oh, I want to size it based on the amount of profit that went into it and just place profit onto size. And it is close, but not quite there. And really it's just the inverse of what it should be. So really easy right here. We're just gonna double click within this field and we're just gonna add a negative sign to the front of it. And there you go, we have a nice looking waterfall chart. Now, obviously we can do things like add profit to color to draw a little bit more insight. We can go into our analysis right here. We can add our grand totals or something like that. Oops, let me go ahead and get that on there. Again, we're not gonna go through all of the different nitty gritty things that we can do in order to make this chart looks better. But obviously, once you complete the waterfall chart, there's some other stylistic changes that you guys can make should you want to. Next one we got is a lollipop chart. So in order to do this, everyone knows how to make just a standard bar chart right here. So if I take category and sales and we change it into a mark type of bar, our goal here is rather than having something like a color legend over here, which sometimes can get quite cumbersome, we want to remove the colors and we're just going to put a shape icon on the end of this. That way, you know, if you have 3 different hospital associations or 3 different school systems or 3 different just standard internal teams or 3 different lines of equipment, you know, you can put a little logo there, which is going to save a little screen real estate because you don't need that, color legend there. So in order to do this, we're going to pull some pictures of my dog onto here, my childhood dog. But just before we do that, let's just take a moment to appreciate the cuteness factor that we're working with here. So we're just going to place a couple of the pictures of my childhood dog Ruby on the tops of these bars. And it really is quite simple here. The only thing we need to do is find the images in their folder. I'm going to choose these 3 at random, and we're just going to right click copy. Then we're going to place them into Tableau's brain. I bet you guys didn't think you guys were doing brain surgery this morning, but if we go to documents right here, we have something called My Tableau Repository, where we have a shapes folder. So this is just where Tableau reads your different connectors, data sources, extensions, map sources, services, shapes, so on and so forth. So when we go into this shapes folder, we do need to add a folder. So we'll go ahead and do this. I'm going to call this Quentin Quarantino. Are you guys going as crazy as I am in this lockdown? You know, I thought that I was going crazy 6 months ago, and now it's just escalating. So there we go. We just have it in My Tableau Repository, Shapes, Quentin Quarantino. We don't even need to reload Tableau. We're just going to go ahead and make a dual axis chart by duplicating my sales axis here, and then overlay that on top of each other doing dual axis. So it looks like we have 3 marks, but really we have 6, 3 overlaid on top of 3. We'll throw a synchronize on that, and then we're going to go to one of our 2 marks cards here and change our mark type to shape, which places a shape, but it's the same shape for every single bar. So we need a discrete field in order to make that shape different. So we'll just take our category and drop it onto our shape icon, and we can go ahead and change our shape to our Quentin Quarantinos right here. Now, when I expand this list, we're going to notice that it's not in there. So we will need to press the quick button, reload shapes right here, just because we added those shapes while Tableau was still running. And now if we open this up, we should have my Quentin Quarantino right there, where we can just assign that palette, press OK, maybe make those a little bit bigger so our ending user can see that. And hopefully we can see that we can now remove that legend, because hopefully my hospital association or my team or whatever the case may be is going to know what those labels are doing for them right there. All right, moving right along. I'm already taking too long. Spark lines. So if we wanted to see a time series of all of our subcategories over time right here, so we'll just get a quick order date out there and our subcategory and maybe put a metric in there. We can see that anything that has a larger sales value is going to be washing out my other ones. So for example, right here, it's hard to draw any insight from art based on the fact that they all have the same axis range right here. So my binder sales, when they spike, are going to be flattening my art line right here. So it's a real easy fix to go from a line chart like this to spark lines. We just need our axes to be independent over here. So we don't want them all to go to 40K. As a general rule in Tableau, anything you want to change, right click directly on it, and we can edit our axes so that we can have an independent axis range for each row. And now we don't get as much of the insight as to the magnitude of that sale, but we do have a much cleaner view to go shopping for trends. We can see spikes independently of where they are with regards to other things. So for example, paper, their axis only goes up to 3,000, but our machines go up to 40,000, and we can kind of shop for seasonality. If we wanted to, you know, we can kind of highlight that last dot right here. So this is just saying, give me the very last line or the very last point of data. You don't really want to do it with the most current, because as you can see, our data set only goes up to 2014. So if I say, give me my most recent month, it's going to say December 2020. So this is just a quick formula to say, give me the very last one in the entire series right here. So we'll take that up here. We can go dual axis right here, where you can see it's placing a dot at the end of my line. Now I have to synchronize before that lines up nicely with that, but now I can get my most current sales at the end of that as well. If we wanted to label it, there is a slightly different calculation right here. Again, instead of getting the very last item, we're just looking up that value. And what we can do with this, it's really kind of slick, is we can convert that to discrete. So we can add it as a label. So that we can add it as a label up over here. So let me give me discrete right here. And now we can see that last sales right here as a discrete header, as opposed to having to kind of mouse over that dot right there on the end of our line. So very easy to accomplish, just a couple of steps of independent axes, and then the label and the dot is just, if you want to. All right, next will be a donut chart right here. So if we just start with a simple pie chart right here by going to a marked type of pie. Now the problem with a donut chart is typically if we want to go dual axis, we place our measure on the second axis, right? Well, a donut chart doesn't have a traditional axis. Let's go ahead and put this profit on angle just so we can see a donut chart that's worth looking at. I don't have an axis to go ahead and drop my second metric on. So we're going to just use a little trick right here. I'm just going to double click right in here and I'm going to say, give me a minimum of 1. Now that's just going to give me a field called 1 that says 1 for every row in my data set. And a minimum of that value is 1. A minimum of 1 is 1. Well, what is a number field or a continuous field going to do? It's going to provide that axis. So now we have an axis on our donut chart. We'll duplicate that right here so that we have a duplication of our donut chart. We'll overlay it very similarly to how we did with our lollipop chart. So now again, it looks like we have 3 marks, but we actually have 6. And all we have to do now is hollow out the center of one of the donuts and then expand the opposing donut. And we have ourselves a nice donut chart. So if you have like a progress to goal or a quota towards completion or something like that, a loan to maturity, this is a great means of visualizing that. All right, 2 colors in a line chart here. So again, we all know how we can just make a standard time series here. We got our continuous month in sales right here, or we can even change our metric and say, give me my profit, or whatever the case may be. We know how to make a standard line chart. Now, what I want to do here is let me just take a slice of this. We'll just take these marks right here and only keep those. Whenever it dips below this 0 line right here, I want to shade this in red. But whenever it's above that 0 line, I want to shade it in black. Well, again, we all know by now probably that there is an area version, but you can see that there's no way for me to have like 2 separate colors right here. So we're just going to kind of trick Tableau into doing it for us. We're going to take another instance of profit and drop it next to this one. And you might be thinking we're going dual axis because that's what we've done up until now. But really, we're just going to use the power of our 3 marks cards to have our bottom area shaded red and then our top area shaded black. So how are we going to do that? We're just going to edit our axes. So we edit this right here. And we want to have this have a fixed start of 0 and a fixed end of wherever that end will be. So you can see it just cuts off anything below that 0 line. And then we're just going to do the opposite below. So we'll edit this axis and we'll have this fixed end at 0 right here. So we have just our negative values. Let me go ahead and change those colors around just because it's quite misleading when your profit is in red. And there you go. We can have 2 different colors of an area chart. Now, obviously, again, we'd want to, hide some of our headers and stuff like that. We'll leave the cleanup for you guys, those grid lines too much mess down on the bottom, but there's a quick way for us to get 2 colored line charts, area charts. All right, bar in bar 2-way. In order to do bar in bar, we take our single measure chart and we take our second metric and we drop it opposite the existing axis, which will give us a dual axis. So we can use the power of 3 marks cards to say, give me a bar in bar chart. Once we synchronize our axes, this will look quite nice. And then we just kind of skinny up the profit bar so that we can denote it is a bar in bar rather than a stacked bar chart. All right, the second way that we can make a bar in bar chart is by using our analysis menu. So we'll go ahead and put a year onto color right here. So we have different segments of our categories represented by the year that they were ordered in. And all we have to do is go up to our analysis and say stack marks off. Now, the benefit of doing it this way here is that you have more than just two separate metrics that you can use. So in our bar and bar this way, there's not another axis that I can use. So if I wanted another measure on here, I can't really do it because we're maxed out at 2. That's the max that a dual axis can do. However, a stacked bar, as you can see right here, can have as many or as few. It's a great way for you to kind of view year-over-year growth. All right, next up is a control chart. So here we're going to try and determine whether or not our values are between a certain threshold, right? So for this threshold, we're going to be using just a simple standard deviation right here. I have the upper bound already created right here. So if we take a look at this, the only thing that it's doing is it's taking the window average. Remember, whenever you see window average, that clues us in that this is a table calculation, which means it takes into account what is in your actual view. That sounds a little bit confusing, but rather than just summing up the sales, we're taking an average as it exists within our specific window. So we need to scope that whatever that window is going to be, which is what table calculations allow us to do. So we're just going to take a window average, and then we're going to add 1 standard deviation. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the bottom limit. But let's go ahead and see the build here real quick so we know what we're looking at before we make our second calculation. So what we want to do is we want to add a reference line for that upper limit. So we basically want to have a dotted line with wherever those standard deviations lie. And then we're going to test whether or not we're between those 2 thresholds. Now, the problem that we have right here is that we cannot base that reference line off of that calculation until we use it in our view. So that's our first step here. So we want to get this control chart. So that's just an average line right there, an average per pane. We want that average plus 1 standard deviation and minus 1. So we're going to need to put our control chart upper limit into our chart on detail shelf. And now you will see that we can add a reference line based off of that value. So now we just have 1 line going through the entire chart. This is what I meant when I said the table calculation is going to allow us to scope it. We don't want an average for the entire chart. We would like that to go per year. So we'll say compute using pane across. So now we have the average per pane, and we have the upper control limit, 1 standard deviation above the average for that specific year. All right, so let's go ahead and make our lower bound right here. We're just going to say the window average of the sum of sales minus the window standard deviation, again, of the sum of sales. So really, really easy, just a couple of clicks right here. We'll call this control chart lower limit. Press OK. We'll once again use that in our view, where now we have the freedom of basing a reference line off of that value. Control chart lower limit. We'll once again take the time to scope this to be per year rather than per for all the 4 years in our data set. And now one thing we'll neglect to do right here is we could write a simple if that. Actually, let's just go ahead and do it. We're not running short on time. We can just say if the sum of sales, and remember this sum of sales is going to aggregate to the level of detail of your view because we've not specified otherwise. So if that value happens to be above my control chart lower limit and the sum of sales is below my control chart upper limit, then in control, else out of control, and we'll end that if statement right here. So let me go ahead and maximize that for anybody that wants to take a quick peek right there. We're just determining whether or not our sales is above the lower limit and below the upper limit to be in control. So go ahead and press OK. We can put that onto color, and we can see that that starts to go in and out of control right here. Now, one last thing that I do not like about this is you'll notice that there's a slight gradient from blue to orange right here. Well, a control chart shouldn't have a gradient. It's either in control or out of control. So one last thing that I like to do here is I'll duplicate my sales axis so we can go dual axis. And again, we're just cheating in a second marks card right here so that I can change this to a circle mark type and take the color off of my other one right here. And now you can see we have a gray line, but as it goes in or out of control, we have a nice dot that lets us know. Now the implications, this is the chart itself. We can make sets of those values. We could, try and explode those out so we can see why exactly are these out of control. There's further analysis that we can do, but the control chart is nothing more than a window average and a window standard deviation. That is it. All right, let's have a little fun with the word cloud right here. So let's say we wanted to see what states show up the most. We can just put state on text and we'll put a count of our order IDs. You know, we could do something like sales on size too, and we'll start to see, where's text? We'll start to see that the states that have the most sales in them, you know, there's probably a better visualization such as a map for this. So rather than sales, maybe we do like a count of the total orders that went into that state. So we could just put a right click drag on order ID, drop that over to size where we can count the orders that went in there. And there you go. You can see California, Texas, New York, Washington, Pennsylvania, and Illinois are going to be our main states that we do business in. You want to change this into a bubble plot? No problem. Change this from text to circle. And now we have a bubble plot here if that's the way that you prefer to look at things. You know, you could even add something like profit onto color. So you can see, yes, there's a lot of orders, but we're not making too much money over here in Pennsylvania. Bubble plot would be much better if you wanted to compare a second metric because you don't have too much leeway when you're just dealing with typed words, but the bubble being sized and colored is something that we can do. All right, next on the list, proportional stacked bar right here. So if we take a look at this right here, this is one of the simplest calculations you'll ever see. It says profit is greater than 0. Now I want you to take special note that there's no aggregation before profit. And we call this a row level calculation. It's going to be going row by row through my data set and determining if that particular transaction was indeed profitable. So if I take this and I place it onto color, it's going to segment my bar into profitable transactions and unprofitable transactions. Now, one thing you want to be very careful of is the proportion to what, right? And it's in proportion to whatever makes your axis. In this case, sales is giving me my axis. So what does that mean for us? It means that right here, this is the false section of this bar. It means that $27,541 was lost. Now, it does not mean that that is the proportion of our orders that lost money. That is the proportion of sales dollars that had losses associated with them. So what does that mean? That means that this loss right here of 27,000 could have potentially come from one order, or it could have been losing $1 on 27,541 orders. So you want to make sure that whatever your axis is what it will be in proportion to. So if we wanted it to be in proportion to the orders, we just have to take sales out and take an order ID and do a count right here. Now it's the proportions of orders that were profitable versus unprofitable right here. So we're going to take this one step further here. Since it's hard to kind of visualize these proportions, you know, consumer, is this the same amount as this section of the consumer in office supplies? It's hard to read those proportions until we can normalize their size. So we're going to go in here and we're going to add a quick table calculation of percent of total. And by default, the whole entire table will add up to 100%. That's not what we want. We want every cell to add up to 100%. And now we can start to kind of make meaning out of those proportions right here as we've normalized the size of each of those bars. All right, here is another way that we can kind of go about the exact same thing right here. So we just have our regular instance of sales. And what we're going to do with here is we're going to do a running total. So going across the pane, I have a running total of my sales. It is useful numbers to know what those running totals are, but again, it's really difficult to see that the proportions of this quarter one, year one, you know, these proportions could still be the same as what they were over here, but since we haven't normalized that bar, we just kind of need to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to back up one step with just a Control Z. We're going to duplicate my sales field right here so that we can have a running total right here. And then we're going to add a secondary calculation. So we'll edit our table calculation, which opens up on my second monitor there. We're going to add a secondary calculation of the percent of total. And again, we're going to change the compute using to cell so that each cell adds up to 100%. And there you go. We can still have our running total. Let me get my running total up here. Put that onto our tooltip. Whoops. Sorry, just making sure I'm adding it to the right one here. So we add it to our tooltip. We can still have those running total numbers while still having our proportions remain intact. So there you have 19,000, and you can see that that does indeed running total up to the end of my year, where it gets to 674,966. Again, I would take a quick second to probably go ahead and open up a new worksheet so that we can take our year and quarter and validate those results. What were the sales values? So again, I'm just making sure that we validate our results and not just taking what we see. But you can see with just a few clicks right here, we can get those proportions as well as those running totals in there by using our scoped table calculations. Moving right along right here, we have a fun one again for you, tornado density. This one's going to have to use a new data source here. And there is a nice little tutorial that you can follow along with this particular one. A really great way to start breaking into hex binning is to follow that quick tutorial. Now, the reason we're in a new data set here is because if you have state level data, so if we come over here and clear out this, and we take our state level data. Tableau knows how to map those states without needing a precise latitude and longitude. So it's going to be able to map those regardless. When you want to start doing density and hex bin mapping is when you have, not even cities. Tableau knows where those cities are just based on their, just based on its online map service. The data set that we're using right here is tornadoes, right? They don't follow state lines, city lines, county lines, zip code lines, nothing. A tornado can start and end anywhere. So that's when you want to start exploring your hex binning. You could also think about, say, for example, you did cell phone tracking at a stadium. You could do density mapping for that. Say, for example, you, having trouble thinking of another one. Ride sharing or Lyfts or Ubers, or where those, like in Chicago, we call them divvy bikes, where you can rent a bike and be on your way. Those are the types of things you want to do density mapping for. But it really is quite simple if you get down to it. So it involves two things. One is it's going to take a round latitude. So that is just the round function, and then it takes its latitude. It's too difficult to do density mapping if you take your latitudes down to the decimal. But if we go and look at our data right here, you can see that the round latitude is simply the latitude rounded off. So we take our round latitude right here, put it next to our latitude itself. And if you had one that had a decimal, so for example, 48.68 right here, let me zoom in so we can all see that, gets rounded to 49, right? Super, super simple stuff right there. And that is actually the beginning of it. If I take my round latitude and place it on columns, round longitude and place it on rows, you'll see that rather than my true state mapping, oops, if you put them on the right shelf, it works. There you go. And now you can start to see that we have that image of the United States coming through, but just with rounded out latitudes. And we can kind of make that bigger and try and make that mesh well. And we have a working density map right here. Now, if we want to get it looking all pretty like they have over here, the only thing it does is it adds another function called a hex bin function. So if we take a look at this right here, it's just the hex bin of the longitude and latitude. This ratio right here is only so you can make your diamonds larger or smaller as you see fit. So if, for example, your diamonds weren't meshing correctly, you could adjust that ratio to how big those diamonds are going to be. And that's the only thing that that's doing. So you just have to pull in the hex bin function after rounding our latitude, and we can get our beautiful looking diamond hex bin map. So we'll take our long and lat off here. We'll use our hex long and hex lat instead. And we should see our image appear as long as I didn't make a mistake somewhere along the way. And there you go. We can take that size down a little bit. And you can already see my ratios are a little bit weird. Also, my mark type is square. We could go ahead and change that into a diamond because that's what we had previously. There it is. And then by changing my ratio, we can show that parameter of the ratio. You can start to get an idea of what I mean by if these aren't meshing correctly. So there's a ratio of 3, here's a ratio of 3.5, and you again have full control over how that appears. All right, next one that maybe not all of us has to deal with right here, but we're going to be showing how we can do survey data right here. So one problem with survey data oftentimes is the way that we get it. So you can see I've already performed a pivot here. If I remove that pivot, this is typically how we'll get survey information. We get a column called Q1, column called Q2, column called Q3, and then we have the values for that question. Now, right here, the questions are hidden for, I don't know, anonymity. We could go and do a join to get that question name in there, but that's not our issue right here. Our issue is that we don't want to aggregate all of our question ones. We want to have a discrete count of how many 5s there were, how many 1s there were. So in order to accomplish that, we just need to go ahead and pivot those. So you get pivot field names. So we have question 1, and pivot field values so that you have the value of 5. Now we can break this out. We have a dimension that we can break this out by, and then we can see the percentage of 5s or the count of 5s or the number of 3s, so on and so forth. So going back to our view right here, the first thing that we want to do is we get our pivot fields values and pivot field names. Now we want this to be broken down discretely, right? We don't want to add all the 5s together. So of all the people that answered 5, we have a total of 330. That's not going to do me very much good because that's not even 330 people. That's 330 summed 5 values. So we want to put this value and make it as a discrete copy. Now you can see that I have 2 copies right here. So both of these are copies of my pivot field values. You can look at the title and see that right there. Now my copy down here is a discrete measure, and you might think that that would work. So if I take this pivot field and I say just convert to discrete, that's what this is doing. But it's still not going to give me exactly what I want. If I place this onto color, again, you can see that's just the summed value. So 1,468 is the sum of all the question 5 results, just discretely. It's not going to do us any good. So again, we need it to be a actually specifically discrete dimension right here. So the second copy, rather than just converting it to discrete, I converted it to a discrete dimension. And when I place that on color, we can see those percentage values coming through. So let's go ahead and we're just going to build this one from scratch here real quick because there is one tiny little trick that I utilize here. So let me just see what's the breakdown here, gender and names. Let's see here. And then we have our pivot field values onto color right here. And we're like, okay, where's my actual values, right? Well, the actual values come from the number of records. So right here, we can see that question 1, yeah, it's question 1. How many question 1s did I get? In order to do that, we need to count the number of records that got a number 1. So in order to do that, again, I just do a 1 up here. So there used to be a field, if you guys are using an older copy of Tableau, you might have an actual field that's called number of records. They got rid of that because there's new relationship modeling where your number of records can be a little bit fluid within one specific workbook. So in order to do that, I'm just going to put the number 1 up here. And if we go to a new worksheet, I'll just kind of show you what that does. If I just double click here and say 1, and I place that onto text, it gives me a column called 1 that says 1 for every row in the data set. So it acts like a number of records. All right, so back over here, you can see that our genders right here, it looks like we've had more survey results from males. And again, we don't want that summed up. So there was 101 responses of 1. But right here in number 2, there were not 96 responses of 2. There was half that because this is a summed value. So again, we don't want that. We want a percentage of total right here. So again, we just come up here and we say, give me a percent of total and give me a compute using of table across. And now we have those percent values in there for each of our genders and questions response rates. Pretty cool stuff right there. All right, let's see here. Last one I think that we have for today is going to be our bump charts right here. So again, we all know how we can kind of see those sales over time. And what we are interested in is rather than see the values of those sales, we just want to see where our regions rank with regards to one another. So if we back up here, you can see this isn't showing me the dollar value that went into that specific ranking. It's just telling you that for January, our central region was first. But as we moved into February, it took a beating and now it was 4th in February, and our South channel is the one that is now ranked as 2nd. So these are called bump charts, very, very useful again for seeing rankings of things across time. So we'll go ahead and build this one from scratch right here. And so we'll take our order date. This is just what I choose to visualize here. Obviously for you, it could be any number of different things. And I think I grabbed region right here and we place that onto color. All right, so now we need an actual metric that we want in here. But again, if we put sales in here, that gives us the actual value. So our first step here is going to be to rank our sales. And we want to rank that with regards to our region, right? Rank 1 per category, rank 1 per customer, rank 1 per region. No, it is rank 1 per region. So we just have to tell it that. We say edit that table calculation and say use specifically region. And there you can see the beginning of our chart starting to take place. So a special call out here, just remember there are different types of ranking. There's competition, modified, dense, and unique right here. So just make sure that you have the correct type of ranking. You would never want to be in the Olympics and all of a sudden there's a tie for first, right? You probably want to use competition ranking right there. All right, so there's a couple of problems with here with this chart that we'll take the time to fix. For example, number 1 right here typically means my number 1 performing object, right? Well, it's very counterintuitive to have that placed on the bottom of my chart. Lower means low in most of our minds. So we'll just go ahead and right click that axis so that we can reverse it, right here. And then we'll also fix it 1 to 4. Be very careful fixing axes right here, because if you ever had a 5th region or something of that nature, remember you truly fixed these to 1 and 4. So maybe instead of doing that, we'll go ahead and undo that, and we'll explore a different way that we can do the same thing. So rather than fixing that, which might run into troubles in the future, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take sales, I'm going to convert it to discrete. What am I doing wrong here? And I'm making a mistake that is not obvious to me, so I might have to leave this one alone for now. What the heck? There we go. Just had the wrong mark type there. So I had it on a mark type of automatic rather than a mark type of line right there. So again, you can see how sometimes these innocuous little steps can kind of throw you off your game a little bit, which is why learning some of these techniques that you don't necessarily use all the time is still definitely going to be beneficial when you run into a hairy situation at your own job. So with this one, I went ahead and kind of made a little dashboard right here. So over here, you can see that I just have region on text and color, and I made it nice and big, and I played with the alignment. So it's middle center right here. And then you can use that in conjunction with your dashboards here. So you can kind of have a nice little highlight action going through. Again, you can always just do that straight from your color legend. I'm always just trying to find ways to make my visuals a little bit more engaging with little circles like that. You could even make like a map shape. So you had a shape outline of the region that you clicked on in order to highlight it, or whatever the case may be. Again, not super important stuff right there. So we'll kind of leave that be right there. All right, let's see what else I got here. Difference from average. So this one will be our last one here. And we want to see, so let me just describe what we have on the screen for right now. We have a year, a quarter, and sales over time, and we have an average line going through. So this is just a reference line. There's nothing on my detail shelf that this is based off of. This just takes a straight average from all of my sales. And what I want to know is hey, what's the difference between this line and the top of this bar, right? How much above average am I? How much below average am I right here? How much below average am I right here? So in order to do that, we have a calculation here. And it's again, an easy calculation. So again, back into the realm of those table calculations where, again, whenever you see something like a window average, we're going to have to scope what that window is. Is it my entire chart? Is it just the years? We have to go ahead and scope that. So we have the sum of sales. And again, there is no window average here. So this is just the sum of sales at the level of detail of our view, minus the window average. So once we set that window, we can say, okay, give me the average for just a year and just take minus the average from that. All right, so if we take our difference from average calculation right here and we place it up here, we just need to go ahead and scope it. So right here, it's table across. So we could even, this is already good information right here. So since this calculation down here is scoped to table across, it is following this average line right here. So the difference between this line and the top of this bar is this bar right here. So we already have good information and we can verify that, right? So this is difference from average 1,848. All we'd have to do is take 134,537 and subtract 132,732, and we would get negative 1848. And then again, if we just scope this, so let's, instead of just truly scoping, let's just add to our view right here. We can just scope our second one to be pane across right here. And now this value right here, difference from average, pane across, 70,910. That's the value that you're over the quarterly average, which we can't even see right here because we don't have a reference line. So if we add our reference line right here and we say, give me my average of sales per pane, right here is my average for the year of 2011. And this would be the difference from that average. Up here is my average for all 4 years, and these values will be the difference from that average. So it's a really cool way how you can use your table calculations to scope either the entire table or by pane, and then you can subtract or add values from your true sales numbers right up here at the top and get those differences from average. All right, that's a lot of charts. That's 16 charts in 45 minutes. Hopefully we got a couple of tidbits that we can take back to our own desk. I'm gonna hand it back to Marnie so she can do our giveaway here. And feel free to ask any questions in chat as they arise. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks so much, Mike. That was a great presentation. Yeah, we haven't had any questions that have come up. We do still have 15 minutes or so here. So if anyone has, anything they'd like to see while we have Mike on the line, let us know. I'm sure we'd be happy to show you other kind of quick visualizations if you're curious. So yeah, enter them into the chat or the Q&A. And while you guys are thinking through that, I'll go ahead and announce the DoorDash winners. If we want to get let's get our contact info up there one more time. So the DoorDash winners today are Ali H and Priyanka K. So congratulations. We will send those out shortly, and then also be on the lookout for an email from our marketing department. We'll send you a link to the recording of the webinar today, as well as a link to view our past recorded webinars in this series on our website. And as I said, this is our final webinar in our Tableau webinar series for now. We hope to be back later this year or early next year with new topics. So be on the lookout for new topics coming up. We do have another couple webinars coming up with some of our other partners other than Tableau. So we have a webinar that we're doing in early November with Irwin. They are a data governance platform. And you can find more info on that on our website. Yeah, so it doesn't look like anything's come up. Mike, we can stick around for a couple more minutes here to see if anyone has any questions. If not, then thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. It was fun.